All right, I think we can get started. So welcome everybody. Good afternoon to most of you. And I know there's some folks from all across the country joining us today. So good morning to those of you out on the West Coast. I just want to thank everybody for participating today. This is a very important topic that we're discussing. And at last check, I understand we have more than 160 people that have registered. Hopefully they'll join us as we go along. We have a great lineup today, and I'm very appreciative of our speakers. I know lots of webinars say they have a great lineup and they have the experts, but in this case, I really mean it. We have a great set of speakers and national experts all throughout the supply chain, the production, distribution, and use of these decarbonized gases that we're talking about, all of which are going to be a critical component of the energy mix going forward. My name is Chuck Feinberg, and among other hats that I wear, I am the executive director of the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition. We are an independent nonprofit and the only entity in New Jersey that is exclusively focused on providing education and public-private project development, leading to the reduction of petroleum and other fossil fuels. We're funded in large part by the Vehicle Technologies Office of the U.S. Department of Energy, and we are funded by them through a contract that we have with the National Renewable Energy Lab. And for this webinar, we're happy to be partnering with Energy Vision, which is another nonprofit organization that you'll hear more about in a few minutes when their president, Matt Tomic, speaks. And it is also my absolute pleasure and honor to have the founder of Energy Vision provide the wrap up to today's webinar. Joanna Underwood, for those of you who might not know her, she's been a pioneer in science-based environmental advocacy for many years. And for many years, she has been a role model and a inspiration to me. So very pleased to have her join us today. I also want to thank our team that put this webinar together, Caroline McCullum, Phil Voss, and Nick Morando. Thanks much to you guys. We could not have done this without your assistance, and Nick will be running the slides today, so if there's any glitches, we can blame him. Anyway, this forum is intended to be one of in a series of educational programs that we've been putting on and hope to continue putting on. Some of you may have participated in our green hydrogen webinar, which was back in June, I think it was. And the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition, working with other partners, hopes to facilitate stakeholder interaction, leading to project development and education and policy and regulatory support, and just general awareness of the opportunities presented by renewable decarbonized gases and the role that they're going to continue to play into the future with our energy mix. So I'm a firm believer that there is no one particular fuel or technology that fits every situation, and we will need a mix of technologies going forward. So with that, enough from me. Again, thank you for joining us. I want to, I think everybody knows the Zoom routine by now, but we want to encourage your participation. So please use the Q&A function or the chat function. We will respond as quickly as we can and as accurately as we can. And if there's something that needs to be directed to a particular speaker, we will find time to do that. And if we do not get to get you the right answer today or any answer today, we will certainly get back to you about that. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. As you can see on his bio, Adam Zellner's tenure as senior policy advisor to the former governor of New Jersey, it was a very consequential time in which the state's first energy master plan was developed. The Global Warming Response Act was implemented, and much of this was under Adam's under Adam's watch while he was policy advisor. So I also have the pleasure of being Adam's partner at Greener by Design. And I've asked him to come today to share some perspectives on where we came from with the Energy Master Plan, where we are with it now, and where we could be going into the future. So with that, Adam, it's all yours.
Well, great. Thank you, Chuck. And good afternoon, everybody. I'll start and echo what Chuck said. A special thanks to everybody who helped put this together, the other panelists and all the folks here. And Chuck, as always, thank you for, keeping the attention where it needs to be. And, as Chuck talked about, I was the former policy director for John Corzine. I had the lucky pleasure of writing the Energy Master Plan, but also the Global Warming Response Act and a few other things. Prior to that, I was deputy commissioner over at DEP on the environmental side. And prior to that, I ran the state's land use planning office. And I'm going to hold that for a minute, right? In addition to the fact it's clear I couldn't hold down a job, there's a moral to that story, right? And I wanted to start out, I was going to start with some fun stats, but I changed my mind. So for anybody who's just woken up in New Jersey or say Virginia, you all know there was a political race that went on, and in some cases people were surprised, in other cases there weren't. There were a lot of political races across the country, and I wanted to start there because I want to change the topic from the big P that everybody pays attention to, politics and fighting and all that wonderful stuff, to kind of the small one, right? That is policy. And you begin to think about successful policy in the government and what we're going to talk about, decarbonization and really cooperation to getting towards a mutual goal. And you can look back to policies where, whether it's telecommunications, as all of us live on, these things, whether it's the ADA, right, the American with Disability Act, a lot of policy that goes on follows a key guideline. And I'm going to come back to this key guideline, but it's the words silence is a virtue. And just hold that for a second as I come full circle on this. So let's talk about the challenge, right? I think we all know the challenge. The challenge is we seem to have gotten to a place where we are at an all or nothing attitude. And as Chuck described, we spent a lot of time writing energy master plans, including the recent one that Phil Murphy wrote, that does not actually talk about all or nothing. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's not all electrification or nothing. It talks about this idea of achieving balance. And when you begin to think about this, where we are with electrification, I think everybody on this particular panel and call knows is we're challenged. We're challenged in a number of ways. We have fractured policy state by state. We're trying to absorb every sector at once. Transportation, your buildings, your office, everything is electrifying as quickly as possible. I often say at these things, right, you can't even go into a bathroom without the electric eye anymore, commanding that even electric controls the water and your ability to get it. And if you combine that with the idea that the electricity now needs to be more, this N+1, we're constantly needing power and data, they've merged together in a weird world. And you combine that with the fact that we want to absorb the transportation system, we want to absorb a bunch of other things. And one more thing, and forgive for those who've heard it, I'm also a professor at Rutgers for many years, so I'm going to forgive myself on the word dieselification. Some have heard that, it's made up. But we have this whole crashing policy of environmental justice and communities who are dissatisfied with their proximity to a lot of emissions. And so we're in a race to get rid of diesel in many of those communities, and rightfully so, for particulate matter, NOx, SOx, other reasons that are here. And what it leaves is this crazy perfect storm where we didn't have enough power to begin with as we electrify, and we need further reliance. We're electrifying more, but yet we're giving up on a lot of things in terms of what we're willing to invest in to make that electricity, moving to more less reliable sources, good sources, but not baseload sources. And the last piece of this is we are having this conversation about gas, right? And why we're here today, right? The how do we decarbonate? And what I think a lot of people forget when you think about this perfect storm of what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, what we're trying to electrify, the fight over, community roles and air quality and all the other things, you think about the Northeast, you think about Vermont all the way down to the Carolinas, you think about February 15th in Polar Vortex Day. And if we try and absorb and electrify all of that, I mean, it just compounds it to a place where you're truly fighting your own system, right? You can never win. And I'm going to add one more thing, this idea of the Home Depot effect, where every day houses are being built, gas infrastructure is being extended. And, you know, as I tell people, the gas infrastructure is an amazing infrastructure. It is almost at every house it touches, at least in places where we have gas. It's high pressure after many storms, so it's reliable more often now. It goes down to water heaters. It goes down to your stove. It goes down to so many different things. And this idea that many people today are out there buying, and many people on this call, I'll bet you, have bought new hot water heaters. And yes, they're more energy efficient. They use less gas, but they're gas. They bought new stoves. They bought new things. It's happening today as we're building out more homes. And what you're ending up with is this concept that you're going to look, and this is why I started a little bit with politics, you're going to end up baiting people into buying things, into making lots of investments, into doing lots of things. And all of a sudden, someone's going to come around and say, hold on, time out. I need you to throw all that out. I need you to get rid of all your investments because we're going to electrify everything. And never mind the incredible infrastructure, the number of substations, the number of wires, the number of transformers, the ugly side of power. Sorry for the utility people who like the lines, but they're not the most attractive things in the world. And I don't think people have thought about the amount of investment we're going to need to make if we try and do all this. Where today we have billions, if not trillions, of dollars worth of investments in gas infrastructure all over the place. It is literally everywhere. And so that, combined with the idea that the electric system is being pushed in a way, as regulations are being pushed in a way, to provide us with decarbonated alternatives. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think wind is probably the best example of that, because you have offshore wind farms being built. They're being subsidized in the electric system through ORECs. Those ORECs are clearly going to allow the wind folks to build 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 megawatts. And what are they going to do? I think we all know. At night, they're going to make hydrogen. They're going to be able to pump that into the transmission systems. They're going to be able to start to go to 10, 20, 30%. And back to that Home Depot effect, as the policy catches up, so equipment gets spec'd, and we start to change this dynamic. So we get in front of it, so that we're not at odds with one another. We're not fighting one another in this all or nothing world of gas or electric, but we're working to decarbonize both sectors at the identical time. Wind makes hydrogen, wind makes electric, food waste makes renewable natural gas. We will be eating 10 years from now. I can almost guarantee we will have not eliminated food, almost guaranteed. And so we need to start thinking smarter, because as we go cross odds to one another, the costs mount up and the ability to implement it mounts up. And I'm going to go back to what I started with, this silence is key. I always think about my neighborhood and my neighbors, and they're nice people, and they like the environment, and they have children, and they, just like others, are concerned about global warming. They cannot go out and spend 20, 30, 40% of their disposable income to redo everything in their house, redo it all for the purpose of keeping up with a system that wants it to go all electric, when the reality is, if we were silent, if we did like we did before, if we replaced the gas with hydrogen and RNG, and we moved what we had to do together, you would have this cooperative effort of decarbonizing the whole system. And I'm going to close on this and turn it back, which I was thinking of the 1969 and the moon landing, and all the pain of procurement and the process we go to today. And right, could we have done it today, because everything has gotten so complicated? But one thing that struck me is, if you remember that landing, it was one small step and one giant leap, right? Man and mankind. And what I find in the world of politics, again, small p, is that when we ignore the costs, when we ignore infrastructure, when we throw things out, when we make it all or none, when we pit Main Street versus policy versus environment, what we end up doing is taking one small step forward and one giant leap backwards each time. And that ebb and flow, that fit and start, leaves us in a place, as where I started, very difficult to make policy work if we can't find a way to cooperatively agree that we're all in this for the same purposes. So I want to thank you. Today you have some amazing speakers that are going to talk a lot about the technology that I was describing, this change in load shifting, the ability to create green hydrogen and RNG and all sorts of different things, green fuels that are going to be out there. And most importantly, an ability to maintain the infrastructure we all invested in and that we all have grown to rely on so well, so that we go back to making these changes without making the changes on the backs of people who may not be able to afford to make those changes. So thank you. And Chuck, I will turn back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. So let's go right into our first panel. So Matt, go ahead. It's all yours.
Thank you, Chuck. And I'll echo your comments at the outset. We're thrilled as Energy Vision to be collaborating with you on this. As you know, but others may not, we were hoping to do this in March or actually May of last year, and we're starting the planning process, and obviously things got derailed, and here we are virtually, but it's meant we've got folks from all over the country and even some folks tuned in from Canada about this really important topic of how we're going to decarbonize gas in New Jersey. So for those of you who don't know me or us, again, I'm Matt Tomic, president of Energy Vision. We're a New York-based national environmental group, really committed to advancing cost-effective, proven, but under-deployed solutions for a sustainable energy and transportation future. And in sort of looking at that, looking at the world of opportunities and the emergence of technology, we came across more than 10 years ago this concept of transforming our abundant, ubiquitous organic waste streams that are in every city and in every urban and rural area into either biogas or more recently, renewable natural gas. And so for more than a decade, we've been largely focused on this sort of underutilized, but really exciting opportunity. And you know, when you're asked to sum up 10 years of work in less than 10 minutes, it's definitely a lightning round, but I'll give it a go. So next slide, Nick. So when we talk about renewable natural gas or biogas, what we're talking about is really methane that is derived from the decomposition of these organic materials that, as I mentioned, are ubiquitous, not just in this country, not just in New Jersey, but everywhere that there are people living in the world. And I think methane, finally, after years and years, is getting the attention that it deserves, because as most of us know on this call, methane is more than 80 times as powerful as CO2 as a global warming agent over a 20-year time frame. And it's that 20-year time frame that's really critical in our fight against climate change. And so when we're talking about organics, we're talking about biogas, it's the decomposition of these materials, and the biogas that's produced as they decompose is typically about 50 to 65% methane. So when we talk about sources of biogas, whether it's New Jersey or elsewhere, there are sort of 3 to 4 major sources. So next slide, please. So first and foremost, including in New Jersey, are landfills. And despite ongoing efforts and commitments to diverting organics from landfills in New Jersey, many other northeastern and western states, unfortunately, the vast majority of this food waste and other organics, yard waste, still ends up in landfills. And despite these landfills being regulated and required to put in gas collection systems, as you see here, ultimately they're only so efficient and so good at capturing that gas. So a significant portion of methane still escapes even at the best landfills. And so landfills have been and will continue to be a source of biogas that can be and should be utilized for energy and fuel purposes. Next slide. After landfills, we have wastewater plants. And I'll talk more about this in the New Jersey context, but many wastewater facilities, large and medium, As you see here, we've got Newtown Creek in Brooklyn, which is very large, rated up to 1 billion gallons a day of water, to much smaller, a facility in upstate New York. But many of these facilities have digesters in place for secondary treatment of sludge. And in that process, they too produce biogas. And because it's contained in these digesters, it's a more efficient process, less leaks, and it's a much quicker process to convert this organic material into usable biogas energy as well as nutrients. Next slide. Third, we have the agricultural sector. And highlighted here, we've got a very large digester facility in Florida, co-located at a dairy farm. And then below right, we have a much smaller, simpler digester system or complex in upstate New York. But in either case, where you have large quantities or even relatively small quantities of cows and you have manure, if you don't manage that manure properly, it becomes a major source of methane that historically has generated significant quantities that just vent into the atmosphere. So by using digestion, you can capture and then utilize that biogas. Next slide. And then finally, last but not least, and this has really been a big push in the Northeast and out West, is this idea of building dedicated anaerobic digester systems to process either source separated organics, so food waste coming out of the municipal waste stream, either at the residential or commercial level, or as in the case in Connecticut, sort of looking at commercial pre-consumer sources of food waste, so spoiled food or other materials that cannot or are not sold and eaten. And again, converting that into both energy and nutrients. And so all of these sort of feedstocks and technologies have been commercial for a long time and are being utilized across this country, including in New Jersey. Next slide. And when we talk about biogas, again, digestion and biogas is ancient technology. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. Early on, it was really used for local heating and cooking purposes. More recently, sort of starting in the 80s, the trend was to build these large CHP systems where you're producing heat and power, and again, on-site use of biogas as a fuel source. But over time, especially the last 10 years, because of shifting policies and economics, it's become more challenging to make these kinds of projects pencil, although there are still several hundred, if not thousand, in the country that are taking biogas and converting it into electricity. Next slide. And so the real push and trend over the past 5 years, as we'll hear a little bit more about, has been to upgrade or purify this biogas using one of 3 different commercial technologies, where you essentially strip out the moisture and the impurities and the CO2, and what you're left with is a 95 to 98% pure methane stream that is then known as renewable natural gas or biomethane. It's essentially pipeline quality and interchangeable with fossil natural gas, which means it can be used for various end uses. Next slide. And as I alluded to, once it's upgraded and turned into RNG, renewable natural gas, it can be used for generating power for various industrial uses, for heating, cooking, cooling, etc., or as a source of transportation fuel in natural gas vehicles, utilizing existing natural gas refueling infrastructure. And more recently, there's been a big emphasis and push to sort of utilizing these feedstocks and sources of gas to produce other high value fuels like hydrogen or aviation fuel. And so that I'm not going to get into, but certainly lots of existing and emerging opportunities to utilize these resources. And when you're talking about digestion, particularly of manure or food waste, you're talking about life cycle emission reductions greater than 100%. So you see 300% reference here. That's in relation to primarily dairy projects where the baseline is methane just venting into the atmosphere at these large operations. And if you can capture that gas and turn it into RNG, you're avoiding the methane and then you're displacing fossil fuels on the back end. Next slide, please. So since 2016, 2017 at Energy Vision, we have been working closely with Argonne National Lab in tracking all operational and under development RNG projects nationally. You can see in the text below, in 2017, there were just 60 projects, most of those at large landfills. But as of the end of this year, we'll see more than 200 RNG facilities up and running, and an additional 120 that are under development. And I'll get into why that is on the next slide. So Nick, next slide, please. Oh, actually, I'm going to come back to New Jersey. So but before talking about the markets and the drivers, returning to the topic at hand today, in New Jersey, as a large populous state sandwiched between New York City and Philadelphia, significant volumes of material and gas already being produced that could be used to produce RNG. So based on some recent studies and assessments, the real low-hanging fruit here is the 7 largest landfills, close to 1.3 million tons of food waste generated annually in the state, as well as 22 large wastewater facilities. And so based on those feedstocks and sources and known existing proven technology, the potential in the state is somewhere close to 95 million gallons of diesel equivalent fuel. So the ability to displace up to about 10% of current on-road diesel consumption using RNG. And in doing so, that's somewhere on the order of 10,000 heavy duty buses or trucks, and reductions in carbon emissions of about 850,000 tons per year. Next slide, please. And so to wrap things up, that there are several existing and emerging markets. The largest, as I keep alluding to, is the transportation sector, given both the renewable fuel standard and state level low carbon fuel standards that really incentivize the production and use as a fuel for on-road vehicles. And that's really being driven in California, more recently Oregon and Washington, and hopefully soon in states like New York, where we're pushing for similar low carbon fuel standard programs. Certainly a lot of activity on the gas utility front, pushing to expand their procurement and injection of RNG into the grid as a way to decarbonize and displace fossil demand. And more, we're also seeing emerging opportunities in these voluntary markets, places like the Port of Seattle, Middlebury College, and the University of California system, where they have very ambitious carbon reduction goals. They use significant quantities of natural gas today and realize that RNG is an immediate opportunity to cut down on that demand and the emissions associated with using natural gas. So lots of markets now and in the future, lots of activity and excitement and growth in this sector, and really eager to be sort of focused on New Jersey and the specific opportunities and obstacles there. So one more slide with my contact info. Look forward to having questions and interactive discussion, and that concludes the lightning round on biogas and RNG.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Matt. Let me just interject here just to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our websites. And if we can distribute it to the participants, we will do that. And all of the slides from today will also be made available to everyone. So with that, Joanne.
Thank you, Chuck. Good afternoon, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm director of the New Jersey Fuel Cell Coalition. It's an ad hoc group that promotes the adoption of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies in the state, primarily through education activities. It's been around for about 5 years after I retired from the Department of Energy in 2015. It was created, the coalition was created in 2016. I spent more than 20 years at the Department of Energy and Renewable Energy, most of that time in the hydrogen and fuel cell program. And I've also been honored to be appointed to the governor's New Jersey Fuel Cell Task Force, which advises the governor and the legislature on how to increase deployment of hydrogen fuel cells to help achieve the state's clean energy goals. And our first report is scheduled for release in April of 2022. So I'm not affiliated with DOE anymore, and I'm not representing them, but I'm going to draw heavily from their information and data because they've been working in this space for decades, and they have, in my opinion, the most up-to-date analyses and data. So with that, let's move to the next slide. So hydrogen can be produced in many ways, and because of that, a few years back, a number of organizations developed a color code to categorize the production methods. And some of these color codings don't always agree, but what they do agree on is that brown, black, and gray are the CO2 emitting production pathways using coal and other fossil fuels as feedstocks. The pink, purple, and red categorize or classify hydrogen from using nuclear power via electrolysis. Depending on which one you look at, yellow is hydrogen produced by solar powered electrolysis or from grid electricity. So there's some inconsistencies there. A national grid has another color code. This one is from the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. This code has white hydrogen being produced as a byproduct of industrial processes, but National Grid has white hydrogen as naturally occurring geological hydrogen that is released through fracking, and there's currently no strategies to recover that hydrogen. But what we're more interested in, of course, is green hydrogen, which is made using renewable power, solar, wind, or geothermal, to power an electrolyzer and produce hydrogen from water. And we're also interested in blue hydrogen, where hydrogen is made from natural gas, but the CO2 is sequestered or repurposed. That's really an important transition, and possibly even a long-term approach to making hydrogen cleanly. Next slide. So hydrogen is an industrial commodity today. There's around 10 million metric tons produced in the US today per year. That's enough to fuel about 50 million light duty fuel cell vehicles. Most of that production, as you can see from the map, is along the Gulf Coast. This is data from the National Renewable Energy Lab. There's also 1,600 miles of pipeline, hydrogen pipeline in the US, again, mostly along the Gulf Coast. For comparison, there's more than 2.5 million, I believe, miles of pipeline, natural gas pipeline in the US. So scaling up hydrogen has a long way to go. And the largest users, of course, are petroleum processing and fertilizer production. Next slide. So the primary application for hydrogen is in fuel cells. Fuel cells are very highly efficient and scalable, so they can power almost any device. And when hydrogen is used, they're clean. There are no emissions, just water. So fuel cell deployment adoption has been increasing in the US, as shown on the left on this slide, primarily in backup power for buildings, microgrids, and telecom sites. The energy resiliency application there being the focus. And also in material handling equipment, forklifts used in warehouses and outside warehouses. There's quite a few in warehouses in New Jersey. And electrolyzers are being produced at an increasing rate the maps show hydrogen production facilities that are either in process or have been built in the US, and then quite a few electrolyzer plants around the country. Heavy vehicles like buses and trucks are also an application for fuel cells. California definitely has the lead in that space, as well as in light duty fuel cell vehicles, with over 11,000 vehicles, 45 hydrogen stations. And some of those buses, 60 buses, are also in Ohio. Ohio has a fleet of buses. So fuel cells definitely increasing. The Northeast, so California is the big market today in transportation in terms of fuel cells and hydrogen. The Northeast was supposed to, and probably still will be, the next emerging market for that application. And it has been delayed, though, by the ban on fuel cell vehicles, hydrogen vehicles in the tunnels in the Northeast. But there are activities going on to address that ban, and that ban is less important for heavy duty, medium and heavy duty vehicles. They use the tunnels less, and so that application is probably going to take off before the light duty vehicle application in the Northeast. Next slide. So hydrogen cost has to come down in order to be competitive in most markets. This analysis is from DOE, and the cost target depends on the application. So for medium and heavy duty vehicles, the cost target is higher than applications in other areas. For example, blending with natural gas, energy storage to store the energy from intermittent renewables, and synthetic fuels. But nonetheless, the DOE target is $1 per kilogram in order to make hydrogen competitive for all markets. Next slide. So DOE recently released a request for information to find out, what the community and the industry and folks are thinking in terms of hydrogen and fuel cells. And this one of their questions was, how can hydrogen help underserved communities? And this represents the responses they got. And so you can see fuel cell buses and public transport came out on top there, and I do believe that that's going to be an important first application in New Jersey and the Northeast, and that will also help to jumpstart the hydrogen fueling infrastructure that's going to be needed to fuel vehicles. And then the backup power, grid resiliency, medium and heavy duty vehicles, trucks, for example, at the ports, drayage trucks and such. Now, interestingly, this data here it does show light duty vehicles. They're down further on the list, but they're still there. And blending into natural gas is in the middle. So this is some of the information that DOE received. Next slide. So we're focused on green hydrogen, and electrolysis is the primary green hydrogen pathway. This shows the current status at high volume. So this is a high volume, projected to high volume cost at approximately $5 per kilogram. And the need is to get down to 1, and DOE is planning to contribute to provide resources, R&D resources and demonstrations to try to get that cost down. And that's going to require reductions in electrolyzer costs, as well as O&M costs, capital costs and O&M costs, and reducing the cost of electricity that's going to be needed to power the electrolyzer. So that work is ongoing and really important work. So the next slide shows, next slide, Nick. So this is also information that DOE got through the request for information, where respondents were asked to identify prime locations for large-scale hydrogen demos. And as you can see there, the Northeast, which includes New Jersey, I believe, even though New Jersey appears transparent there, is definitely in a region where large scale demos are considered, which is considered to have a large potential for large scale demos. And so it's third after California and Texas. So if you want more information on the results of DOE's request for information, which is going to guide their funding opportunities, their funding opportunity announcement will probably come out later this year or early next year, I would imagine, based on history, previous history there. And they also have a loan guarantee program, a loan office that provides funds for demonstrations of this type. And so the information from the request for information will guide their funding opportunities, and so therefore should also guide those who want to submit proposals for funds. And I think that's my last slide. I have maybe one more that closes out. Yeah, so you can get my contact information on the New Jersey Fuel Cell Coalition site. And I'm happy to answer questions later when we're on the panel. Thank you.
All right, Chuck, with your permission, I'll be moving forward. Thank you, Joanne. We'll transition a bit from hydrogen to propane. And really specifically, we're going to talk about renewable propane. So let me just tell you, I'm Tucker Perkins, and I work for the Propane Education and Research Council. We often shorten that to PERC. But really today, I'm speaking to you on behalf of the New Jersey Propane Gas Association, which is very much in alignment with clean cities across the country, and particularly with Chuck and his group in New Jersey. So it's nice to represent you. And as I would say, you know, while we're in this war against fossil fuels versus clean electricity, I think there are a few fuels like propane and natural gas that actually are low carbon and great solutions for decarbonizing now. If you'll give me the next slide, I start really by talking about, you can go ahead and turn it. Yeah, thanks. I really like to start about carbon intensity because that's, you know, particularly while everybody is at COP26 and the conversation is strictly on climate and carbon, it's never lost on me that I'm not really apologetic for one moment about regular propane. You can kind of see the grid today in the US averages a carbon intensity of 165. The units are over there, but even the grid in New Jersey today is something over 100, about the same as diesel and gasoline. Conventional propane today, everywhere but California, has a carbon intensity of 79. California gives it an 83 because of their own calculations. And as I start talking about renewable propane, depending on the feedstock, the intensity can be as low as 11 or 12 and as high as 40 or 43. But you begin to see right here that as we talk about transportation particularly, or even buildings electrification, that moving from particularly diesel to regular propane in transportation brings advantages for decarbonizing now. If you give me the next slide, please, it just really brings that chart out. And I show it to you because I know a lot of people here are interested on a national level. So that the grid of 165 across the country is kind of meaningless. It's about what your state or what your electric grid is doing. But you see, some of these states are really ugly. As I traveled around the country and you look at Montana, Wyoming, even Missouri, a tremendous use of coal. It's still shocking to me, as we've had years to think about a cleaner climate, how many states are still using coal, oil. For me, wood is equally dirty when we think about CO2. But that's where that comes from. If anybody wants to see the background calculations, I'm always proud to give it to you. Next slide, please. But I do want to talk about renewable propane because as much as we feel strongly that the current market is, we know we don't have any need to be apologetic about conventional propane. We need to be able to talk about a future fuel that has to have a lower carbon intensity than 79. And so I show this slide because this is a slide we did several years ago when we really just started to talk about renewable propane. And these were actually the attributes we felt like we needed to have, that we needed to have abundant feedstock and needed to convert relatively easily meaning not using a lot of inputs, because we wanted to get to a final product that was competitively priced. And as we talk today about renewable propane that's coming primarily from renewable diesel, it's interesting to me that in many of the first bid situations we've seen, the conventional product or the renewable product is quite simply priced almost at parity with each other. It's shocking to me. So I just want you to remember these slides, because even as I talk about other pathways, it's still the same. We really need to have an abundant feedstock so we can get to it. It's relatively inexpensive, converts easily, and gives us a final price, a final product at the right price. Next slide really just shows the reality of renewable propane. This particular shot is the REG facility in Gesmer, Louisiana, which I like to talk about this facility. They were early to the market. They first started producing 2 million gallons, then 4 million gallons, and 8 million gallons, now 10 million gallons. But it just, to me at least, brings the reality of the fact that this is a real product and not something we're just talking about. The next slide shows today's production. And if you kind of sum all that up, today where we are making renewable diesel from fats and oils, where there's a market for renewable propane, we can yield 5 to 8, sometimes 10%, depends on the feedstock and to a degree the process, but somewhere between 5 and 10% of the renewable diesel yield we can turn into renewable propane. So if we look at what's out there today using the feedstocks and the processes we want, we would have around 300 million gallons of renewable propane today. Now, actually, the reality today is we're doing about 30 million gallons, because a lot of these facilities, as some of you on this panel actually know, because you're in the battle with us, some of these facilities are in the process of being built. Some of them are in the process of adding the infrastructure to produce renewable propane. And frankly, some of them are still trying to decide whether they want to produce renewable diesel or produce 8 to 10% of their yield in renewable propane. I could also show you a second chart that shows about another 300 million gallons of renewable propane coming from plants on the drawing boards. So if we're pretty clear, there's 300 million gallons out there today. There's another 300 million gallons of renewable propane on the drawing board, but I'm quick to say that's only about 600 million gallons. And transportation demand alone, that's fine, but we really want to begin to be able to talk to companies about replacing it for home heat, for commercial use, for forklifts. And so we don't really believe that 600 million gallons is enough in the US. So I wanted to show the next slide, which so many different ways to show it, and I decided to show it in the most boring way possible, just a chart. But again, to be quite literal, each of these bullets show projects that are in some form of a pilot or study right now, sometimes in the US, often in North America, but sometimes across the world. And, you know, renewable propane for us is not just something that we're doing in the US. We're working very closely with our partners around the world. And it's interesting, over the last couple years, I think sometimes our emphasis has shifted. And I'll talk about that shift in a bit, because you see, today, there was a time when we really had a lot of belief that we were going to be able to take methane that's being wasted today in the oil fields or not being captured, not even being flared, and take the methane and convert it to propane. We still see possibility with that, but as we think about the ease of conversion, and we now see right now we see a lot of promise in glycerin to propane. Generally, as most of you know, there's a lot of glycerol out there, and changing glycerol to propane is quite simple. So each of these are in place. I do want your eye to go to the bottom bullet just for a moment, because so much talk around ammonia, dimethyl ether, hydrogen, quite a bit of effort has been paid in the last 6 to 12 months about using propane as a carrier. So propane and ammonia are amazingly similar. Of course, ammonia is fairly corrosive and not really fun when it leaks. But how would we use propane as a carrier of hydrogen, and then at the point of use, get the hydrogen out of the propane? So a lot of work here. And my only point in showing you this is, while these bullets haven't changed in about 2 or 3 years, I think the emphasis has changed as we really now begin to think about things like sustainable jet fuel. Probably not going to take sustainable jet and pull a stream off for propane, right? The market for sustainable jet is going to be 100% sustainable jet. So on a worldwide basis, we see this, but to be clear, we don't think that we're limited at all to just renewable propane from renewable diesel coming from fats and oils. We see, particularly today, some syngas options that give us really great hope. We also see a lot of glycerin to propane that gives us great hope. And then the last piece, if you'll go to that next slide for me, kind of want to show you where this all goes. We really believe, I use the word cocktail, I'll talk a bit about precision energy, but we really begin to believe that there will probably be a fuel blend that could very well have one of 4 components. Conventional propane with its relatively low carbon intensity today, renewable propane, again, the carbon intensity could be anywhere from 11 to 40, but realistically it's in the high 20s, 25 to 30. And then now we begin to introduce renewable DME. And, you'll hear it over and over about this competition for basically dairy waste, but the carbon intensity of renewable DME that comes from dairy is minus 278. So what you're looking at there is a molecule that we are actually running in transportation today, and the carbon intensity of that molecule is 0. We really know that we can go below 0. And when you couple this with some of the engine technology we are demonstrating right now, maybe a pretty exciting development for us, which has been loosely telegraphed, but Cummins and PERC are in a partnership with an engine, 6.7 liter propane engine, and its natural carbon intensity is cut the carbon emissions are cut 25% from the next best technology today. And so now you take that kind of technology and this kind of fuel change, and all of a sudden you see how, if the language is really about a clean environment and really about how to get there fast, that we're demonstrating a massive shift in reducing carbon. And we're talking about that engine in model year 2024. And this fuel, as I said, is a fuel we're running today. So if you go to the next slide, you kind of hear me begin to talk about this precision energy. And I didn't really talk about this 3 years ago because I don't know that we really believed where DME was going to go. But I think for us now, what we see is, I envision what could easily be the New Jersey mix. Again, one of 4 fuels: propane, renewable propane, DME, renewable DME. Could easily have the UPS mix, which is the fuel that UPS wants to use across the country. And then lastly, it could always be the mix for Perkins propane, or, a company specific mix. But I think however we migrate, it'll be probably in partnership with propane, renewable propane, DME, and renewable DME. And that carbon intensity will steadily drop from 79 on its way to 0. And frankly, I don't believe we stop at 0. I think we go below 0 with some of these newer fuels. So with that, I'll show you my contact information. Again, easy way to find me is email tucker.perkins@propane.com. Chuck, I'm always happy to be a part of your panels and always love what New Jersey's doing. But again, I'll put that final plug in that I'm here today on behalf of the New Jersey Propane Gas Association, and we are glad to be a part of this crowd. So I'll stop at that and look for questions later. Thanks.
That's great, Tucker. Thank you. Let's move right into Andy Burnham from Argonne National Labs.
Thank you, Chuck. I am Andy Burnham. I work at Argonne National Lab. Matt already somewhat plugged a little bit of what Argonne does. My team here at Argonne is a group of researchers who look at a wide range of different fuels and technologies to understand the environmental and cost impacts of transitioning to them. I'm going to talk about some of the things we do as a group and then things that I do specifically to support the Department of Energy's Clean Cities coalitions in helping people make good decisions about the costs and benefits of different technologies for specific applications. So we can go to the next slide. So the first kind of underlying tool that maybe you have even heard of is the GREET model that I wanted to show. The team here developed this in 1995, so it's been around a long time. And so when Tucker and Joanne and Matt were giving some of those carbon intensity numbers, almost all those have some root in the GREET model. So it is, kind of really the Department of Energy's gold standard for doing these types of analyses where we're trying to figure out what is the carbon intensity of this fuel versus that and doing these types of comparisons. The model covers not just light duty and heavy duty vehicles, and it has been expanded to include air, rail, marine. So really trying to cover all of transportation, as well as getting into buildings and other chemicals and kind of a wide range of areas. The model, why, you hear kind of these different numbers is, we're analyzing feedstocks and fuels. And so those might not be always
Andy, you're muted.
how much, hopefully, am I okay? You guys still hear me or?
Yep.
I apologize. So basically, thank you. So just summarize maybe what I was saying is the GREET model is a tool that can help researchers, policymakers understand the differences between technologies. That's the key kind of point that I want to make, that we're being able to compare different technologies, and we're going to talk about RNG and hydrogen in specific. So we can go to the next slide. So I specifically developed the A-Fleet tool using a lot of the information coming from GREET as a baseline of kind of all the environmental factors. So the A-Fleet tool was meant specific for fleet managers and people who are maybe less interested in the real nitty-gritty technical details of understanding kind of like this pathway versus this pathway, like really getting into those details. It's more of a higher level tool, and it includes cost as well. So, kind of getting to the bottom line. It has a lot of fuel and vehicle technologies, not as many as the GREET model, but it's more kind of like, here are the fuels and technologies available today so you can do your comparisons. It does include CNG, LNG, hydrogen. It includes natural gas sources for for different renewable sources. So it's been mentioned already, kind of landfill, animal waste, wastewater sludge are kind of the biggies. We have a municipal solid waste pathway as well. And then for hydrogen, we can look at steam methane reforming, natural gas, and then different types of electrolysis for different sources. So you can plug in different pathways for your kind of specific situation and look at the emissions benefits of it. The tool you can see is available there. We have an online version and a spreadsheet. So if you're trying to do something quicker, you can jump on the online tool and get results from there. We can go to the next slide. I just wanted to highlight, because again, we have like 30 different researchers, and I'm highlighting a little bit of the work that I've touched on. I've spent a lot of time on natural gas, but colleagues here have a lot of expertise in hydrogen well. So I wanted just to touch on a couple of, I think, interesting points, building off a little bit of what Matt were talking about on RNG and Joanne was talking about on hydrogen. So we spent a lot of time on methane leakage, trying to understand the impact of that on kind of the emissions of different vehicles. What you see here is that in general, natural gas, even from fossil fuel sources, can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a moderate amount, a small moderate amount. If methane leakage is too high, then it can be slightly higher. You see that kind of in the red blue bar situation. Once you go to RNG, you see significant reductions. And here I'm just showing one case. This is, I think, landfill gas. I'll show in the next slide that differentiation that we were talking about. Here, yeah, once we go to, specifics of different pathways, it's already been touched on that you can get negative emissions that can be counterintuitive. Like, how do you get negative? And Matt touched on this is basically, what's your baseline? If you're just pumping methane straight in the atmosphere and then you start capturing it, you can actually, have negative emissions just by taking away from a terrible scenario. Basically, that's the long and short of it. The other work we've done on kind of RNG and natural gas has been on supply. So my colleague, Marianne Mintz, was kind of alluded to in Matt's work, where they're looking at where these RNG projects are happening. And I think just one thing just to be mindful is just, how much RNG is out there. And it's going to depend on, obviously, the state. And this isn't New Jersey specific study, but our focus of this workshop, but, kind of we've looked at it on a US basis, and that there's, about a potential for production of maybe 4 to 6 billion gallons of RNG on a diesel gallon equivalent basis. So that's, that's a lot of, that's a big number. What does that mean? Well, we use about 45 in 2020, we used about 45 billion diesel gallons for on-road transportation. So we're talking in the ballpark of, 10 to 15% of RNG could be covered by those sources that, we see here: landfill gas, manure, wastewater treatment, and potentially some, food waste and fat, oil, and grease can also supplement that. So it is not insignificant. It can, really make a difference. And I'll go to the next slide just to touch on hydrogen, what we've done here. So my colleague, Amgad El-Gawani, is one of the leading researchers on all things hydrogen. He has looked at both hydrogen cost and hydrogen greenhouse gas implications. And so in this slide, I just wanted to show you some of his recent work looking at different heavy duty applications of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And so the black bars show diesel, and then the other bars show different types of hydrogen fuel cells using different feedstocks. And what we see kind of on the left-hand side is that when we have duty cycles of vehicles that are stop and go, we see the pickup, and P&D is pickup and delivery box truck, or a transit bus that has, basically an urban city cycle. We see pretty significant benefits even using kind of a SMR, natural gas, based hydrogen. Once we start using more and more renewable, the reductions get larger and larger. Of course, we can get to basically zero emissions if we use renewable hydrogen. The challenges is when we get to more highway cycles, like a Class 8 long haul truck, the reductions are less because hydrogen fuel cell vehicles they really have benefits really in those, city cycles, but diesel actually does pretty good in highway cycles. So it's really important to understand, what application you're looking for, both for natural gas vehicles and heavy duty, to look at like where the benefits are. And then kind of I won't say the wet blanket part is what Joanne was mentioning of, like, as we want to push towards renewable hydrogen, really the key thing is, reducing production costs. So DOE has set that goal to get down to $1 per kilogram. Joanne showed this as well. Natural gas SMR production is about $1 to $1.50 per kilogram. For wind, it's about $2.50 to $4.50 per kilogram today, and solar's $3.50 to $7. So we have ways to go. Department of Energy, is really pushing towards this, and we're making, that effort to really get to low cost RNG and low cost hydrogen to, increase the supply of low carbon, fuels. So I'll leave it at that and leave questions to the end of the panel. Thank you very much.
Andy, great presentation. And I'm going to finally kind of put a bow on all this. And Chuck, thank you for having me here and this great set of panelists. I'm John Gonzalez with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I'm going to really kind of just talk about what Clean Cities does. Chuck talked about a little bit, but I want to go into a little bit more about what we do. Next slide, please. And I have this first one is driving disruption. I really believe that Clean Cities, this disruption that we're talking about is moving away from gasoline and diesel and looking at the different alternative fuels. And that's really what Clean Cities does. It drives us to look at these alternative fuels. And there's a lot of fuels within this portfolio that I'm going to show on the next slide that really talks about how we can start decarbonizing our fuel sources. And these are really the fuels here that we talk about through the Clean Cities Network. These are the different fuels from biodiesel to electricity to hydrogen, natural gas, propane, ethanol, and the different variations within those, within renewable hydrogen, renewable natural gas, renewable propane, all those different things. But the one thing we're all talking about here is reducing our use, but also replacing our dependency on the traditional fuels, gasoline and diesel. Tucker, I'm going to steal something from you said earlier, not even on this call, but what I read earlier was we really don't believe there is a silver bullet. I think everybody kind of talks about electricity and driving towards the electric market. I like what Tucker said is it's more the silver buckshot. We're looking at all the different fuels as opportunities to really move our transportation forward in a much cleaner in a much lower carbon fashion. Next slide, please. And the ones I really kind of are focusing on as far as this meeting goes is, we talk about electricity and we talk about its carbon intensity and we know it comes from different sources. So we also want to look at the other fuels that are out there too. We don't just have electricity, we do have natural gas and renewable natural gas. It's been spoken about here several times. We have renewable propane along with conventional propane that has very good carbon intensity. And then also hydrogen, which is another fuel that we're continuing to move forward. And also Chuck had his great presentation back in the summer on renewable hydrogen as far as how can we do that as well. So there's a lot of ways that we can start reducing our carbon intensity without going into just one complete solution. We believe there's multiple solutions out there. Next slide, please. Also, we want to remember that there's been a lot of investment put into these different corridors for all the different fuels. Electricity, we're building that up, as we know. There's more being built on the hydrogen side, not as fast as I think we would like, but it's definitely moving forward. There is a strong propane, natural gas, and also there is an LNG infrastructure as well from a corridor standpoint. So there's multiple options that folks can look at when you're looking to decarbonize your fleet and to really help pull us away from the traditional fuels, gasoline and diesel. Next slide, please. And really, I like to talk about Clean Cities. That's kind of what part of my role at the lab and working with Chuck. It's really a complementary framework, what Clean Cities can do for you. It brings a lot of information. Like Chuck said, they're an information resource. They're a local partnership. Also, they have access to the national labs, like folks like Andy, to do some technical and problem solving to help you understand and gain better information regarding your fleet and your application as far as how these alternative fuels can really help you do things that you want to do from an environmental standpoint within your organization. So Clean Cities they're locally based. We are the National Renewable Energy Lab, which we represent the entire United States. Chuck is representing New Jersey. And please understand that feel free to look for your coalition in your area, because they are there to help you with some of these issues that you might run into. Next slide, please. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the information resources that we have on the Alternative Fuels Data Center. That's what that afdc.energy.gov stands for. It's the Alternative Fuels Data Center. There is a ton of information there. You can see all the different fuels that are represented. We talk to folks like yourselves and say, hey, what don't we have there that could help you? And your information is what's helped us build this and make this a stronger platform to be able to get quality information out there that's unbiased about alternative fuels. And so once again, so we're not just looking at the silver bullet, we're looking at all these different options that can really help you move forward in meeting your climate goals. Next slide, please. And my final slide here is I just don't want people to get the impression that they get forgotten. Clean Cities is really here to help you. It's about developing partnerships, developing connections. I think many of you here know Chuck, and you know what he's done for you folks, and work with people around the country. There's great opportunities to develop these partnerships. They can help you find awards that might be available. They're an information resource. That's really what we do, is we provide information. I'm not selling any kind of fuel here. I'm just giving you information to help you understand your options that are out there. And then finally, a big role that I do at the lab is technical problem solving and technical assistance. If things go wrong, you have a resource out there that can help you to try to get those things righted back again. So feel free to reach out to us, reach out to your coalitions. They are our conduit, and we're here to help you. We're here to help you. So that's my final slide, and thank you for attending today.
Well, that's great. Thank you, John. And thank you to all the speakers that were part of that first segment. I know we've thrown a lot of information out at folks. I hope it can all be absorbed, because it's all great information. So what we're going to do now is move to our next grouping of speakers, where we take some of the theoretical and some of the technical based discussions that were part of the first panel, and we get some perspectives on what folks are doing right now, here and now, with these projects. So we have a private sector perspective from Dan Hagan of Waste Management Organics, and a utility perspective from Mark Karras. So Dan, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for asking me to participate. It's very interesting to listen to the participants, and hope to provide some information now with respect to what we're doing right here in the state of New Jersey around converting food waste to renewable natural gas, and provide a little bit of insight around what WM is doing in New Jersey with respect to moving from the use of diesel to CNG. So if we could advance the slide, I'll dive into it. You know, within WM, right here in northern New Jersey, we operate a facility that takes in roughly 100 to 125 tons per day of source separate organics, packaged food waste materials, and other liquid organic waste, converting it to an engineered bioslurry product that is ideally suited for co-digestion. And the facility is permitted for 250 tons a day of inbound material, capable of going up to a total permitted capacity of 500 tons per day. So next slide. What's interesting, you know, within this operation is the ability to process this material. We see a high level of contaminant that comes in with these organic waste materials. We need to extract that so that the only organic fraction heads on to the co-digestion end of the equation. It's really important to get that contaminant fraction out. And what we know is that for every inbound ton of organic material that we're bringing into this facility, passing it in through a co-digestion process has the ability to produce in the range of 3 to MMBTUs of biogas from the system, capable of energizing 8 to 10 homes. So there's significant energy production potential in this material, and we've been able to produce a product that puts us in a position to gain that benefit. Next slide. Little reflection on the type of material, little input on the type of material that we receive. I talk about the contaminant. When you get into projects where you're dealing with 100 to 200, 250 tons per day or more of inbound material, dozens, if not hundreds of customers, we know that we're going to see a full range of different products. We had to develop a process to be able to remove the contaminant fraction and grab the organic fraction. And you can see here, typical load of material to be hitting our tip floor, upper right-hand corner, more of a source separated organic stream, and right-hand corner, a stream that we'd frame up as packaged food waste. And this would be something that might come from a food manufacturer or a grocery store or other facility. Next slide. That contaminant fraction gets removed. And you can see when you call into this material deeper, the level of contaminants that are hidden in there. So the point here is that these are inorganics that we need to get out of the process, recycle when we can in terms of the product that we fractionate out. And of course, we have to discharge to dispose of the residual at the end of the process. Next slide. So the product we produce, I mentioned earlier, is a engineered bioslurry. We do a complete lab analysis of our product as we batch it on a daily basis. And the photograph shows a typical slurry that we produce, somewhere in the range of 15 to 18% total solids, high in volatile solids, high in energy content that we pass on and integrate into an anaerobic digester for the production of renewable natural gas. And next slide. Photos from a project that we have in New York City. At the left-hand side, material that's processed, as you saw earlier, at our core facility where we remove the contaminant and produce the engineered bioslurry product is transported to a receiving station. In this case, located at the Newtown Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant in New York City, where we co-digest with their biosolids. On a daily basis, that material is pumped over a 24-hour period into the digesters, and the resulting biogas that's produced from the system is captured. This is a gas cleaning and compression system that was installed by National Grid that's slated to be commissioned in 2022. So the gas will be cleaned, compressed, and put into the pipeline. Next slide. We operate in Boston, Massachusetts, just on the north side of Boston. We have a facility in New York City and Brooklyn, northern New Jersey, just outside of Newark, and just outside of Los Angeles. And we got additional developments throughout North America at this point in time, where we continue to intend to service our customers with organics diversion, processing through our core system, and co-digestion or digestion in multiple locations. Next slide. It's interesting, the Water Research Foundation had done some reporting some time ago. Just want to point out that what they had reported was that an approach of producing a slurry, hauling it to a wastewater treatment plant for co-digestion was the most favorable greenhouse gas reduction approach as compared to landfilling, organic material composting, and a variety of other options that are in play. And I just want to point out too that in New Jersey, WM has 224 CNG vehicles, fueling stations in Camden, Trenton, Matawan, and Toms River, and we'll be adding more in Lafayette and Woodbine in 2022. And the fleet, with our current fleet, we've reduced diesel fuel consumption by roughly 1.8 million gallons and 3.1 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. So a couple of real highlights for what we're doing on the fleet side here in the state of New Jersey. Go to the next slide. And if we do have a few minutes left here, this video it's about a 3-minute video that illustrates what we're doing with food waste organics and pulls the whole story together.
Dan, I think we'll hold that video to the end if you don't mind, if we have time at the end of the program.
Perfect, Chuck. Let's do that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi,
All
thank
right,
you very much.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Dan, thank you very much. I'll pick it up from here. So good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you for allowing us to join. My name is Mark Carr. I'm Senior Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, Marketing and Energy Efficiency at New Jersey Natural Gas. I also run our gas supply group, who's responsible for all the gas that goes into people's pipes and keeps people warm in the wintertime. So we're going to have the next slide. Just a quick brief introduction to New Jersey Natural Gas. We serve nearly 565,000 customers in the 5 counties in New Jersey. Operate over 7,500 miles of distribution and transmission pipeline within the state. And, you know, our associates every day are committed to great customer service. And that's why, you know, not only that, but the communities that we serve and the environmental purposes that we keep focused on to ensure that we're moving forward into this clean energy future. And that's why we're a perennial leader in the J.D. Power customer satisfaction. You know, we're about 90%, more than 90% of our customers are residential, and about 5 out of 6 of those customers are heat their homes with natural gas. But aside from just providing, you know, warmth in the wintertime, we're also a major CNG fuel provider, and we dispense about 670,000 gallons annually of CNG to fleets. So we can skip over to the next slide. You know, a number of years ago, we began to get the sense that we needed to do something if we were going to try to catch up on these leaks and to have to stop worrying about leaks in our system. And more than a decade ago, we began to invest heavily in trying to eliminate cast iron from our system. And over the last decade, we spent almost about $2.3 billion to eliminate leaks. So, and we were the first in the state back in 2015 to eliminate cast iron from our system. And we'll be the first in the state later this year to eliminate unprotected steel. And what that does, as you can see on that chart, is that drives our leaks down basically to a very negligible amount, so that we are confident as we begin to move forward that not only are we doing the right thing, but we're also eliminating the GHG from emissions from our system. And we took a look at the GHG emissions and our commitment to the Global Warming Response Act. We've already achieved 50% reductions from the 2006 levels. But those investments really have positioned us. And so if I can flip over to the next slide, you'll see that we are now positioned to deliver decarbonized molecules to our customers in the clean energy future. And I want to thank Adam Zellner so much for clearly articulating the fundamentals behind why our vision is so practical for moving forward to that clean energy future, and why we do that with real optimism about what's going on. So the next slide, you'll see that by 2050, our commitment really is that we believe we'll serve our customers with a carbon neutral fuel supply. And where will that come from? On the next slide. Matt did a great job, so thank you very much for teeing it up on RNG. Within New Jersey, as we look at the market, the biggest opportunities that we see are from landfill gas, from wastewater treatment plants, and from food waste. Unfortunately, agriculture and dairy farms are really not a real opportunity in New Jersey. But for landfill gas, wastewater treatment, and food waste, we are really excited about the opportunity of partnering with people and making investments to be able to make those part of our gas supply portfolio to our customers and begin decarbonizing our fuel stream. Next slide. And as Joanna talked about on green hydrogen, that's another key opportunity for us that we see on how we can provide decarbonized fuel to our customers. So what we are looking at right now is really taking the surplus renewable energy, whether that's wind or solar, and using electrolysis to create basically green hydrogen, and we're injecting it into our pipeline. Flip the next slide. And as we take a look at the opportunities in the future, I think New Jersey has a very ambitious goal for creating a large amounts of renewable energy, more than 7,500 megawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2035 and 14,000 megawatts of additional solar capacity by that same time period. And what's going to wind up happening is there will be a supply demand imbalance during the off-peak periods. And what we would like to do is we are now positioning ourselves to capture the efficiencies of that, take basically what is constrained renewable energy and create green hydrogen to avoid waste and benefit our customers by either injecting that into the system for fuel use at their homes, for appliances and for heating, or basically for electric generation or even for transportation purposes as well. So if you flip over to the next slide. And that clean energy future really starts today. So back in October, we were the first company on the East Coast to actually build and operate a green hydrogen project that takes 100% of the output and injects it into our system. Flip over to the next slide. A little bit more color on the project. We started on October 12th, where we turned the valve and began injecting hydrogen into our distribution system. It's entirely located within our Howell LNG facility. And basically what it takes is renewable electricity that's provided through our regular procurement of green electric power, which we do for all of our facilities, and basically creates hydrogen. And we're capturing the hydrogen. It takes the water, it splits into hydrogen and oxygen. We're capturing the hydrogen and injecting it directly into our distribution system. And that's going to offset right now about 180 tons of CO2 per year. It's a small step in this first project, but it's a giant leap for the clean energy future. I'm really excited on how we can show everyone, regulators, politicians, and others, that this can be done safely, and we're beginning to do it today. So next slide. And so, there's lots of positive attitude around hydrogen and where it's going to go. And, the other speakers have talked about, the DOE and other people beginning to focus on this and driving the cost down. And we know we have the infrastructure to be able to leverage this asset so it's not being wasted, and we have real opportunities to decarbonize our fuel stream. You can flip over to the next slide. Columbia University was talked about this as well, and to say the best way for the path for going forward on this, and our best opportunity, is really to leverage the amount of infrastructure that's been invested to date. It's all underground, it's highly reliable, and we're there for our customers in all times. We're not as impacted by weather impacts as our brother in the electric industry are, because generally they're above ground. And so our highly reliable system can be repurposed for that. So what's the great thing that needs to be done? Well, I think, as you saw very clearly, we were benefited by our regulators, who enabled us as partners to begin to accelerate the removal of cast iron and unprotected steel from our system, to be able to reduce fugitive emissions and begin to deliver these carbon neutral fuels. The second thing is we're being able to invest to produce those fuels, but we'll also be investing as well in other investments like carbon sequestration. And there's no better example of that we talk about, which is our carbon climate initiative, where we're partnering with the Nature Conservancy to invest in the restoration of saltwater tidal wetlands, and basically in the Barnegat Bay. And we launched that program a few months ago, and we're really excited about it, because that's another way of being able for us to achieve lower carbon emissions within our environment. So I'll wrap up with this last slide. And basically, we have been very fortunate to have great regulatory commission that supports us. They've enabled us to make investments that have positioned our system to deliver decarbonized fuel by eliminating cast iron and unprotected steel. And we'll begin working on the last piece, which is of other protected steel pipe that needs to be replaced in order for us to get our system completely up to spec. We believe RNG from landfills, food waste, and wastewater are really going to a real opportunity for us to enhance our gas supply portfolio to get to decarbonized fuels as soon as possible. We're excited about the green hydrogen project and looking to grow that in the future, specifically as more renewable generation sources become available to us. We'll be able to leverage lower cost power to do that on a more economic basis. Green hydrogen, again, can be deployed in a number of ways, not only for gas system for end use, but also for long duration renewable power storage. And all of these decarbonized fuels can be used not only for home heating or appliance use, but also for transportation purposes as well. We're excited about this new clean energy future, and we're looking forward to being a major part of it and making New Jersey a better state to reside for our customers. So thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share these ideas with you today and to participate in this panel.
Great, thanks, Mark. And thank you, Dan, also. So I think we're going to forego the panel, at least for now. We're running a little bit behind schedule, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for the next set of speakers to talk about that case studies. But I think we could take a minute or two right now with Caroline or Matt, if you could tee up the Q&A and the chat questions and comments, and let's make sure that we have all of them responded to. So if you want to do that right now, let's take a minute or two to do that. I see one here, Adam Zellner. I don't know if you're still on, but there's a question about the renewable energy credits and specifically for hydrogen for electric power generation. Do you see that happening? Well, first of all, let me know if you're still on. If not, if anybody else has any opinions on that, please chime in. Guess not.
Mark Carr, jump in.
Yeah, I think that one's a little tricky. Go
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, so Matt, I think what we're beginning to see right now is the government is starting to work towards production tax credits for hydrogen as well. And that hopefully will be part of the reconciliation bill that's been worked in there. So there'll be some subsidies that will be provided to that. But with respect to RECs, we have not seen or heard anything yet as of right now.
All right. Well, something to keep an eye on as this continues to develop.
Yeah, two other, I think, simpler questions. One from John: does hydrogen gas need to be mixed with other fossil fuels to work? So that I guess would be another good one for for this panel or for Joanne.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was answering one of the questions in the chat. So what's this question? I was answering a question on alkaline electrolyzers, which are part of the.
Yeah, so I think a very simple question: does hydrogen gas need to be mixed with other fossil fuels to work?
Well, no, not in fuel cells, certainly. Hydrogen is used in fuel cells used in the applications that I showed on one of the slides, in the forklifts, the light duty vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, buses, backup power. So I'm afraid I don't really understand the question.
Well, it can certainly be used on its own, I think is what you're saying.
Absolutely,
which
absolutely.
Which is great.
Right, and then it can be used in blends with natural gas to reduce the CO2, the carbon footprint of natural gas applications.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good follow-up question in terms of, I mean, we've been looking at some of this in Europe and even in California, but you know, how the big question is how much hydrogen realistically can get blended into the pipeline before you start facing issues around you know, cracking pipes, etc.
Yeah, hydrogen embrittlement. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps the Argonne, Andrew, other Argonne staff know, but I do know that that's another area of investigation by the Department of Energy, looking at hydrogen embrittlement, metal embrittlement issues in pipeline materials, and developing new materials to accommodate hydrogen at higher concentrations.
Matt, just real quick, just to jump in, and sorry, but so GTI has been taking a look at that, and you know, the safe line in the sand is about 20% blending. When you begin to get above 20%, that's when you begin to impact appliances in that regard. So, you know, the New Jersey Natural Gas project really is, you know, we're less than 1% by volume in the summer. You know, in the winter time, it's going to be very small compared to our general output, and we felt very comfortable with that. But again, it's the whole aspect of what the company's specific strategy is. There are other utilities that are looking at this to really kind of create hydrogen hubs where their hydrogen projects will be designed around whole communities. And that in Europe, you're starting to see that in Europe as well. Within New Jersey Natural, again, we're blending it into our entire system, keeping it at small volumes so that, and we know the type of pipe we're putting it into is steel for a short run, and then it's into plastic systems where there's been no impact at all. So it's, you know, there's been enough research, but again, we're partnering with other utilities as well as NREL and GTI to take a look at all this research that needs to be done and to get to these answers as quickly as we possibly can.
And then a quick follow-up from Mark from question from Susan. What percentage of your current gas supply would you be able to meet with RNG? Is that something that has been looked at for your particular network?
Yeah, so we're looking right now as to see how much we can, looking at the market potential. Right now, the volumes for RNG are basically the biogas has really been used for generation. Some of those are being now repurposed to RNG, and we're beginning to see as much as we possibly can. There are certain projects that can get almost 3,000 decatherms a day out of a landfill, and anywhere between 50 to 150, maybe 200 out of a wastewater treatment plant. So, clearly the landfills present the greatest opportunity. We're trying to move that as quickly as possible. We send out about 50 billion cubic feet of gas a year, so it's going to be small in the earlier years, but we're hoping to get that percentage up as quickly as possible over the next 5 to 10 years.
And then 2 questions from Michael. Start with the second one for Andy. Does AFDC have analysis on power requirements to create renewable fuels measured against renewable fuels energy densities?
That one we maybe can take offline. I can share my information, but I think the answer is no. Specifically, we do look at those factors. I'm not sure if you're also trying to, examine the, what's the best use of a feedstock type analysis. I'm not sure if that's where you're going with that, or it's kind of, yeah. So feel free to reach out to me directly.
But I guess to follow that up, the life cycle accounting methodology does incorporate some of that in terms of, energy needs for production and transmission.
Yeah.
And that does get built into the overall carbon intensity, right?
Right. If that's kind of okay, if it's that kind of question on the basis of energy density that we track basically on a energy consistent basis. So we, go on a GGE or DGE, those are like gasoline gallon equivalent, diesel gallon equivalent, and or million BTUs or whatever the unit you want to use, megajoules, you can use that. And that's a standard approach in this to make sure that we're comparing fuels in a apples to apples basis. And then you have to make sure what the efficiency of the vehicle is as well. So that's another important factor when we're doing these types of analyses.
Got it.
So,
Looks like
so
the last,
Matt,
just one more there, Chuck.
yeah, okay, go ahead,
And I
one
think
more.
Juan is really going to be speaking to this very, very shortly in terms of the case study, but question from Michael in terms of commercial fuels, is there one that is immediately available and affordable that can accomplish decarbonization? Speaking from the RNG perspective, that is certainly a commercial option today that, at least as we understand it, is being made available at parity to fossil natural gas, and even in some cases at a discount, given the the incentives available through the renewable fuel standard and state level low carbon fuel standards. So, certainly yes, and somewhat dependent on the fleet application and fuel use. But I think Juan can speak more in more detail about that in terms of Manhattan Beer's experience.
Yeah, that's a great segue. So let's move into the next segment, which is case studies and presentations by people that are actually living with decarbonized renewable gaseous fuels, right now, and we'll speak to their experience. So first up is Juan Quasino. Juan? Is Juan on? Did we lose Juan? All right, Nick, why don't we
I
just
see
move-
Juan. Juan, are you muted? He's talking, but We're not hearing it.
Hmm.
Wouldn't be a webinar without some technical difficulties.
All right, we should probably come back to Juan. If we could move on to Rick Dovey.
Sure. Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rick Dovey. I'm the president of the Atlantic County Utilities Authority, the ACUA. And our experience in across these topics is pretty extensive. And then we're hopeful that a couple projects that we're working on now will come to fruition. So a little background on the ACUA, not all the background, but we have two major functions in Atlantic County or Eastern Atlantic County for wastewater. We operate the regional wastewater sewer plant that serves the basically the build-up portion of Atlantic County, serving about 200,000 people. It's in Atlantic City. It's been operational since 1978, and it's got about operates around 30 million gallons a day of treatment. So it's a secondary treatment plant. We do not use digestion of sludge. We incinerate our sludge, and we also incinerate sludge from other entities that bring their sludge to us at a fee for disposal from throughout New Jersey. That facility has several things in place that make it unique. First of all, it's very windy there, and we learned about 16, 17 years ago that it was windy enough to have a wind farm. And so we have a 7.5 megawatt wind farm built by a private company that leases property from us and sells us electricity at a discount. Why do we have we found that our electricity costs were very volatile, particularly in the 1990s. And we wanted to find a way to do something to purchase electricity that was, quote, green and stabilize our cost. And so we have that wind farm that provides about 60% of our electricity in the course of a year. Of course, it varies across the year, the months, and the days, and the hours. The other 40% is sold to the grid by the owner of the plant. The current owner is Leeward, a large national fleet owner of wind farms. It's been very beneficial, over almost $7 million in savings in electricity costs for the ACUA at no cost or risk to us. We didn't pay for it. We don't insure it. We don't maintain it. So it's been a very beneficial, both financially and, of course, the impact on the reduced impact on the environment and emissions, where the source of our electricity is much better. We also have a solar array, or a series of solar arrays, that was one of the first ones in New Jersey in the early 2000s, one of the larger ones. That is owned by us, and we maintain that. And again, it provides about 2% of our power at the wastewater treatment plant. And the other part of our operation is solid waste, located at our mainland campus, so to speak, where our solid waste facilities are located. So we operate a landfill. We receive about 330,000 tons a year of waste. We also have a compost facility for yard waste and vegetative waste that operates separate. We have a recycling processing center that we receive all the recycling in Atlantic County, or most of it, I should say. And then a very large part of our operation is we collect trash and recycling and yard waste in just about every municipality in Atlantic County. And we also collect recycling trash in Cumberland County and recycling in one municipality in Cape May County. So we have a large fleet of trucks. So my first introduction to compressed natural gas came through Chuck and the Clean Cities program. When we were looking to bring our fleet, our trash collection fleet, which we now have over 65 trash, what you would call trash trucks, those are all CNG, or 87% of our fleet is CNG at this point. We also have pickup trucks and other work trucks, both in wastewater and solid waste, that we utilize CNG. We have our own CNG station that we own. We're obviously the larger user of that station, but there are other outside entities that utilize and buy compressed natural gas from us. The supplier of natural gas is from the local gas company, utility in South Jersey, serving our area, South Jersey Gas. And we also, at the landfill, have had for almost 18 years, a landfill gas to electric project. So we're extracting the gas from the landfill, and through our third party, our partner, a subsidiary of South Jersey Gas, that has been turned into electricity over that period of time. And as was discussed earlier, sort of the economics of generating electricity from natural gas and the operational issues have increasingly decreased over that period of time, where we used to see about a net benefit of almost $1 million a year to the operation of the ACUA budget. That's decreased dramatically. So we have just finished and concluded a sort of a redo of our agreement with South Jersey Industries, their subsidiary, where we are going to transition to renewable natural gas. And over the next year or so, the project will go through permitting and design, and but the blueprint of the economics of it we're going to move forward with that project. So we've been anxious, actually, we were anxious to make that move about 5 years ago, and the gas company in the last 2 years has come to be on the same page, and now they want to move forward with this project. So we're looking forward to that. So in fact, the gas from our landfill will be used for our CNG fueling for our own purposes, and will also be bled into the natural gas system of South Jersey Gas. There's a large pipe that goes right down adjacent to our property and our location. So we're looking forward to that project moving forward. It's just a matter of the two of us just coordinating and going through DEP for the various permits. But the economics of it look very favorable for us. Obviously, the impact and environmental benefits are terrific. So we're looking forward to that. Going back to our wastewater plant, again, because of the leadership of Clean Cities, we're looking to do or participate in a pilot project for green hydrogen. So we would use wind generation from our wind farm and generate green hydrogen. And the green hydrogen this would be a demonstration project that could be used in a number of different ways. First, it could be blended into the natural gas system. As discussed earlier, could be used for transportation fuel, for fuel cell usage for different levels of vehicles. It could be used as storage and backup and resiliency for our own wastewater plant, and any number of other uses that hydrogen can be used for. We would be looking to use our treated effluent from our wastewater plant to use in this pilot project in the electrolyzers, and also use this. We're looking at moving towards bubble diffusers for our aeration system using air that would be generated through this project. So we're looking forward to that project moving forward. So far, we've literally over the last 15 years between all these projects saved millions and millions of dollars for our ratepayers, helping us have the lowest rates for both trash disposal, landfill costs, tipping fees, and wastewater treatment costs to our member municipalities. And the environmental benefits have just been, very substantial and very significant. I'd be happy to talk about other aspects of our operations and the impacts of these projects as we continue the webinar this afternoon.
That's great, Rick. Thanks so much. Let's go back to Juan Quasino. Hopefully we can hear you now, Juan.
It's working now, Chuck?
Hey, there we go.
Okay, can you hear me good?
Hear you perfectly.
Good, thank you. I'm sorry about that. I have some issue here with portable speaker. I tried to have a different speaker that didn't work well. So a little bit about us and who we are, what we do, and why we're doing it. Manhattan Beer is a privately owned company. We are not in the energy business. We are not in any type of fuel energy. We are not doing anything else but delivering beer. But the owner of Manhattan Beer always want to do what he considers the right thing to do for our customer and the community and employees as well. So we has different initiatives to where reducing our footprint and have a great environmental image is basically the main thing that I can highlight here due to not being in the energy business. So Manhattan Beer has been into the natural gas and solar and different initiatives for over 20 years. But to talk about natural gas, which is the main focus today, I'm here today to make sure that if anybody think that natural gas is not safe, that people are debating between going to renewable natural gas or compressed natural gas and have a doubt that how do I fuel my trucks? Will the truck work? Will the trucks be as efficient as they are in diesel? Or is there any downside to that? So that's why I'm here today, to let you guys know that we've been using it for over 20 years and it worked great. So can you give me the next slide, please? So I like the photos. It's part of the difference that a CNG truck make when you driving into the city and you stop next to somebody that you don't have the fumes, you don't have the noises that are coming out of the engine, and it's great for the people around us. So we start back in 2001. We start with diesel conversion. So we took our diesel engine and converted to natural gas. There were not such a thing as a OEM natural gas trucks that you can order from a dealer. That option was not available. We had to retrofit our trucks. Luckily, we were able to work with some OEM and build natural gas trucks 10 years later. And around 2012, 13, we approached International and Volvo, and they decided to build natural gas trucks. Unfortunately, International only did one production. They have other issues, but Volvo stick to build trucks for us, and now they offer it for everybody. Those trucks that you see there were the first Volvo electric. I'm sorry, not electric, natural gas. Today, we have over 200 natural gas trucks, and these trucks are my favorite because we have a fleet of diesel that is, you guys are familiar with all the problem we have with the EPA standard in 2010. The 2010 to 2014 trucks were nothing but problem with emission issues, especially in local city, where you have to do regeneration and use urea to reduce, to clean your emission system. So on CNG, you didn't have any of that stuff, and you didn't have to park the truck for 45 minutes on the road to do a regeneration while you was making your delivery. So this truck proved to be much more reliable than diesel. They work much better, especially in the cold weather. During the winter, we don't have the issue of diesel gelling up and stuff like that. CNG work much more efficient during the cold weather than diesel. There are cases where CNG might not fit everybody, but in our operation, is the perfect fit. And I explain why. Can you give me the next slide, please? So that's a sample of what our fleet look like today. Those are our CNG trucks built from the factory, driver lover, everybody like them. And those are the trucks that we have, over 200 today. We did retire the first 45 trucks that we built back in 2001. But even after retiring those, over 50% of our fleet is still running on natural gas. Next slide. So the reason why I consider our operation to be the perfect fit for natural gas is because the biggest barrier on natural gas is, where do I fill my trucks? Can I go long distance? Would I find CNG station? So in our case, the capacity of the tank on the trucks, the onboard fuel, is enough to finish any of our route and get back home and refill. So for that reason, we built 3 CNG stations in 3 of our main facilities. And that is where we locate, we send all those CNG trucks. All the diesel trucks are in the 2 facilities that we don't have a CNG station today. But the Long Island, the Suffern, the Allstate facility that do very high miles, those trucks do close to 300 miles a day. They go out with a full tank, they finish their route, and they come back home and refill the truck on site. It's a very reliable system because you don't depend on a third-party carrier to bring you fuel. In our case, our fuel is direct pipe from the grid right into the CNG station, and all the CNG station do is compress the gas from the pipeline into the truck at 3,600 PSI. So that is what makes us a great fit, that our truck comes home at the end of the day and park next to CNG station and refill. Doesn't have to depend on anybody else or try to route the truck that it had to pass through a CNG station to refill. We don't go through any of that pain. So that is, in our case, it's a great operation. The CNG station do have some downsides, and it's just that they are very expensive. You have to invest on building the station. And the other downside is that many facilities don't have the pipeline or the pressure to power a CNG station. So people that are in that situation will have to have a storage tank and take delivery of their gas. So it increase a little bit of the cost for the fuel. And also it's a little less reliable because you depend on third party to bring you fuel. But it have great benefits. The benefit that it has is that there are incentive available to where building a station and to buy the trucks as well. So the incentive make it a little bit more accessible, and it's easier to build it and maintain it. And the other great benefit that we see is that we don't have to deal with a winter issue. We have many issues during the winter with diesel in a diesel tank that you have to keep the fuel treated for the environment, for the weather, and you don't have to deal with the environmental issue that you have with diesel fuel. You have EPA, you have DEP, everybody is, you have to comply with other agencies. And now you have the liability when you have a diesel spill, it could be a huge liability. In 20 years, I had never had to stop a CNG station because of a gas leak. And if anything ever happened, this CNG station, they all have methane detector around them and have automatic shut-off valve. That is, there's a leak, will automatic shut off the gas valve to stop the leak. So we find it very reliable and clean. As you look at the photo on your left, I still have a diesel tank there that we don't use. We haven't been able to get rid of the tank complete. We are waiting to finish our conversion, our transition to CNG to get rid of all those diesel tanks. Our goal is by 2024, get rid of all those diesel tanks and be 100% CNG and possible electric. Next slide, please. So part of what I was showing you in the previous photo where the CNG trucks, the CNG station, we had 3 CNG stations in Bronx, Wyandotte, and Suffering, New York. We had some electric charger for electric trucks. Very important point is that this year we put 60 new CNG tractors in service. And with those 60 CNG tractors and 5 electric that we ordered, we removed 78 diesel tractors from the road. That is huge in this area. We are in the Holmes Point area where asthma rate was very high. The area was very contaminated. So we removed 78 old diesel trucks from the road in 1 year, and looking forward to remove 35 additional trucks every year until we finish our transition from diesel to CNG and possible electric. So today, 53% of our trucks are CNG and 49% are diesel. The reason why we will finish our transition with the supply chain allow us, because there's a shortage on supply for everything, we not only replacing 35 trucks, we are ordering trucks to reduce more than what we purchase. So for every 5 trucks that we purchase, we might retire 6 or 7 trucks, depending on what we can get our hands on. We are getting largest trailer, more GVW capacity to be able to reduce the size of our fleet and have less vehicle on the road. Next slide, please. I think that's all I have. I actually reduced the slide to make sure that we finish on time.
All right, appreciate that, Juan, and everything you do. I've said this several times. If every fleet had a fleet manager and a advocate the way Juan Costino is at Manhattan Beer, we'd be in a much better situation than we are now. So next is Ricardo Hamdan. Ricardo, I'm going to ask you to limit your talk to 10 minutes if you can, so that we can try to finish on time and still have some time for Joanna's wrap up. Ricardo?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Do you can I share my screen? I think these are different format of slides. Or can you just hit next, please, Chuck?
Nick, there we go.
Okay, yeah, let me share my screen. I think it'll be a little bit easier.
Let me see if you have.
Because this is not the format that my slides were in. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, can you guys see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So hello, everybody. I'm saying hello from a hotel in Nova Scotia here in Canada. So today I'm going to talk real quick about some of the case studies that we've done and everything that you heard about all throughout today of RNG and hydrogen and kind of how those two intersect in some of these projects. So I'll try to go super quick. I don't have a lot of time, but I'll just go super quick. Just really quick who we are. So we're a Swiss company, Japanese parents, based in the US and Canada. We're about $3.7 billion company, got offices all around the world. We specialize in energy from waste and renewable gases. This is a little bit of our footprint that we have in North America. So Knoxville, New York City, Norcross, California, and Toronto, which is where I sit at the moment. I want to talk about decarbonizing infrastructure. And today, you've been hearing this time and time again, electrifying is great, but we can't really electrify everything. So we see RNG as a bit of a gateway fuel. And for all of you guys that are involved in, decarbonizing not only our gas grid, but also our cities, it's always good to have a plan, a solid plan, and to know that the infrastructure that you're building today, can be transformed for a low carbon economy with transitioning from RNG to hydrogen. Just quickly, like where do these two intersect, right? So where does RNG and hydrogen intersect? And you've been hearing a lot today about we're doing this hydrogen pilot. We're now putting hydrogen in the pipe. And a lot of people tell me like, well, do I buy CNG buses? Do I do hydrogen? Like, what do I do? So today, the good news is that, if you have an RNG facility, it has enough runway to also become a hydrogen facility. So we have this great intersection between two of them, where a biogas plant today using gas upgrading can also have electrolysis. And with the CO2 of the gas upgrading, kind of like that off gas, you do a process called methanation. And with that, you can put it into today's pipeline. So if you have, the point in this one is, if you have a hydrogen electrolyzer today that you're trying to do, and you're getting the incentives and you have the solar and you're making it work, but your pipeline isn't ready for it, which as you heard earlier, the pipelines in New Jersey are getting ready to be there. You can still put it in the pipeline as methane and kind of increase and double up some of that production. And then if tomorrow the hydrogen pipeline, full hydrogen pipeline is ready, it's easy. You just inject them separate. Same as that. If you have a gas upgrading and electrolysis, again, you can SMR the biogas, steam methane reformation, split the gas, crack it open, and then you can have hydrogen. So again, my point being, you get to keep the gas upgrading assets that you're building today and the infrastructure that you're doing today. And as you add electrolysis assets, they both will help tomorrow and they both help you decarbonize. So today, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some of the examples that we've done and some of the case studies that we've done. So just quickly before we jump in, RNG and hydrogen are the molecules or, the vehicles to decarbonize heavy industries such as cement, steel, and ethanol. And this past week and this week, you'll hear a lot about it right now. And people at COP26 and others that are kind of pushing for that green steel, green cement, green ethanol agenda. So as you heard earlier, people are allowing, more blends of hydrogen in pipelines. And again, the RNG, the CO2 that comes out of an RNG, a gas upgrading facility, say, for example, in a landfill, could be mixed with some of this hydrogen generation and then blended to make, more natural gas, more renewable natural gas, to then put it back in the pipelines and extend its life as the industry transitions to process organics separately. So today, we're going to talk about 3 types of hydrogen. You've heard of them already. Blue hydrogen, we're not going to talk a lot about that, but that is a thing where you capture some of that CO2. The 2 that we're going to focus today is green hydrogen that you heard already, from electrolysis, and turquoise hydrogen. That is something that I'm going to introduce today, and that is hydrogen derived from high temperature pyrolysis of biomass. In this case is the digestate that we produce at our facilities. This process produces zero carbon hydrogen and biochar as a byproduct, and actually is quite feasible today. And the green premium for this product is not as high. So again, this is just a brief picture on kind of how the different products of biogas and RNG fit in the context of a city. And this is a nice little picture of the first carbon negative bus in Toronto, powered by our client and friends at Stormfisher Environmental in London, Ontario. Let's talk about the case studies real quick. So the first one that I want to introduce to you is our CompoGas facility that we own and operate in San Luis Obispo in California. So this facility takes about 36,000 tons per year. And it currently produces electricity under the biomat program in California. So what is interesting here on Decarbonizing Gas Grid is that we are taking the digestate that comes out of the back end, that normally would become compost. And what we're doing with that is that we're putting a pyrolysis unit to generate turquoise hydrogen. So not only do you reduce the level and the amount of digestate that you have by about 70%, but also you have a green hydrogen or a turquoise hydrogen in this particular case that you can either inject it in the pipe as developments go, or transport it and sell it to one of these plants that we're talking about, right? So cement plants, steel plants, and whatnot. Any industrial user of hydrogen, and this is something that we will be testing as we go along. The plant will go into our SLO facility, as you have read probably in the news, and we hope to have some of these great results starting this coming summer or fall. This is probably our signature plant, and when it comes to like hydrogen and RNG intersecting. And this plant is a facility owned by Audi, the car manufacturer. And this plant is in a city called Werlte in Germany. This project is about 6.3 megawatts of electrolysis that's happening. It is a plant that produces some of the excess power that solar and wind has. And as you can see here on this side of the screen, this is a digester facility. Actually, this is connected to a place that receives manure and that receives food waste. So all the biogas that's produced there is then processed in an amine system that we put in there right here in the middle that creates the RNG. And then from there, we take the CO2 that comes out of that, mix it with the hydrogen that is produced here in this building where the electrolyzers are, and mix that with CO2 plus the hydrogen in a methanation unit that is in the back of this building. We produce syngas that then goes into the grid. And then all these G-Tron vehicles, all these Audi G-Tron vehicles, they go in, the fuel is with CNG. And what that does is, they have a card that, which credits them for the RNG that they're using. This plant has been in operation since 2011, and it produces 330 cubic meter hour of that particular hydrogen-based RNG. And then the rest is, I believe, about 1,000 cubic meter hour of raw biogas going into the upgrader. Some of the other pictures of the electrolyzers are here in the bottom. This is a close-up of the methanation reactor. You got the amine system here, and this is the electrolyzer hall where we have 3 electrolyzers working and then 1 spare in the building, so a total of 4. Another plant that we have is a plant that we have in Japan. So it's a pilot before we do the second one. So that one is a teeny tiny pilot, about 160 kilowatts. It started in operation in 2019, and this is for the Japanese market. So this is where the electrolyzers that we did, internally just now with our own technology, that's where some of that went on a proof of technology, as well as our containerized methanation solution. So again, for the interest of time, this has been extremely successful. And now in 2020, after this passed and the Japanese government saw it and approved it, now we are working on our newest methanation facility that is 8 megawatts, and it's called Impex 2. So just a tad bit larger than the one that you saw there in Audi. There's another facility that we're doing in Switzerland right now. It has a capacity of about 2.75 megawatts, 550 cubic meters of hydrogen. This is a hydrogen only system that is going to, as you can see here, garbage trucks and buses. And this will be in Switzerland, and it'll be operational next year. So this is some of the renderings on how we are doing the electrolyzers in a double container stacked. So as you grow in size, some of these projects are now coming in at 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts. The ability to do them modularly, the ability to put them together and deploy them in multiples is something that we're working on. And again, just details, I'm sure people will send you that. I see Chuck there in the screen saying cut it out. So with that, thank you very much. These are some of the examples of things that we're doing today that are being done, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. I don't think we have time for questions, but if anybody does have questions, please follow up with us after the program, and we'll try to get back to you. And I know there's some other remaining questions in the Q&A that I don't think we're going to get to, but we will get back to you with the responses to those. So now my good friend Chelsea Jenkins.
Hi, Chuck.
Hey.
Happy almost Friday.
Pretty much.
All right. So thanks to Chuck and the Coalition and Energy Vision for hosting this webinar today. It's a topic I've been very passionate about for a long time. I currently serve as the Vice President of Government Affairs for Roush. And before I was with Roush, as Chuck said, I was his colleague, Director of Virginia Clean Cities. So over the last more than 20 years, I've lived through all the clean transportation technology trends with many of you. And over those years, we've all felt the pressure of the trend of those particular trends. And I just want to underscore the beauty of organizations like Clean Cities that has the staying power since the 90s is that Clean Cities is focused on providing a variety of solutions to fleets based on their particular needs and desires. And that's also how Roush approaches product development. The next slide shows an overview of the company. So I thought I would start more macro scale and quickly cover the evolution of our company and the capabilities that we've developed as a result, and then transition into how we translate those particular capabilities into commercializing products and developing a product development strategy, and essentially placing bets on technology, and then end with some case studies and updates on how we're working with the hydrogen, natural gas, and propane industries and other partners to decarbonize the fuel that our customers use to power over 40,000 of our ultra low and zero emissions vehicles today. I find a lot of people know our name from the products companies, Roush Fenway Racing, Roush Performance Products, Roush Clean Tech, but as I said, few understand that entire value chain that's kind of shown at the bottom. And essentially over the last 50 years, Jack Roush has developed a vertically integrated product development company. So a mini OEM in a sense, and 5,000 employees, offices all across the United States, a couple even out of the States. And we've grown organically our capabilities that are rooted in traditional automotive engineering and applied them to other markets outside of those services. So that's allowed us to have a lot of flexibility over the years. And the next slide provides a good example of just how broad our customer base is. These are all Roush Industries customers, which is the services side of our business. And as a result, we don't talk about these really cool programs and projects and products a lot, often because of NDAs. But you can see we still service a lot of the traditional OEMs, but we've expanded our capabilities over the last several years to service a lot of the new startup companies It's focused on commercializing electric and autonomous technology in particular. Government defense is another sizable market, and in addition to entertainment and aerospace. And you can see we have customers like Bell Helicopter, SpaceX, things like that. The next slide discusses our experience in developing electric vehicles, mostly for other companies. And I wanted to, this isn't a webinar about electrification or electric vehicles, but I thought that this was would help kind of frame the discussion. So we announced that we're commercializing Class 6 truck. 2023, we'll begin delivering that. And so that's our first commercialized product. But over the last 20 years, we have been developing other products for a lot of other companies like the Ford and other OEMs to develop light duty electric and hybrid vehicles. We've also partnered with companies like Google, Canoe, Neuro, FarmWise, and the like to develop autonomous vehicles and technology. But more recently, we've been working on developing the more medium and heavy duty applications for companies like Cummins and our own Class 6 truck. And so all of this experience has prepared us for hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle development. And that's a focus of today's discussion. We've been excited and actually a little bit surprised by just the exponential increase in inquiries we've been getting this year about interest in us developing trucks for lots of different applications for lots of different companies. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. The next slide shows a few examples of prototype vehicles we built over the years. The upper left photo shows a project we worked on in 1998, and it integrated compressed hydrogen into normal internal combustion engines. We based that project on Ford Transit, and it featured a 2.3 liter Ford engine that was capable of running gasoline or hydrogen. The hydrogen was stored in a 5,000 PSI tank, and it held enough gas to run the vehicle for up to 135 miles. So that was in 1998. We also worked with a British company on hydrogen refueling stations that used electrolysis technology to generate hydrogen from water on site. And then fast forward 10 years, and you see the upper right is the vehicle we developed with Ford Motor Company. It's a production intent fuel cell Ford Fusion. You might have heard it broke the land speed record in Bonneville and raced to 207.3 miles per hour. So that was a fun program. We have that in the Roush Museum in Livonia if you're ever up there. More recently, though, we've partnered with CARB, Ballard, Linamar, and CTE, as well as some others to co-develop hydrogen F59 vans for a UPS demonstration in California. And so a lot of this experience is now informing, like I said, our future product development strategy and what we're placing bets on. And I think in terms of commercializing a hydrogen truck, the policy landscape has some maturity, I think, to go before you'll see a lot of options out there that you can purchase today and have delivered. There are also a ton of other projects and partnerships we're working on, including some with New Jersey Clean Cities, and to hopefully develop a more national scale program to commercialize a variety of Class 6 and 7 hydrogen vehicles. So if you're interested, shoot Chuck or Caroline a note and we can loop you into that concept. So the next slide is an overview of Roush CleanTech's products over the Class 4 to 7 space. And we've been deploying these for over a decade. Like I said, it's over 40,000 vehicles, medium duty, and that's with 2,600 customers. And we're almost at over 2 billion miles of accumulation. And what I love to talk about is you can see in all the different products that we have available, propane's offered in all of them. Electric, we're offering in that Class 6, 7 space, but outside of that, we do that because propane is extremely versatile. We have customers that are urban, rural, big fleets, small fleets, extreme cold temperatures, extreme hot weather climates, you name it, we've always been able to accommodate their needs. So I think that I guess the message is that we've invested very heavily in propane technology development, and we're committed to continuing to investment because it works. And we have lots of happy customers all across the US and Canada that prove that. So the next slide, just quickly flash the Class 6 electric truck that will be delivering in 2023, but it shows 120-mile range, 14.5 payload, 2 different types of charging. But to move on to the next slide, I mentioned that because in order to do what we want to do cost effectively and reach some of these ambitious goals and seamlessly move people and things around the world, we have a lot of work to do with on the electrification side, and still a lot of barriers that we have to knock down and questions we have to answer. So until then, we're going to continue working with companies like this to deploy propane. These are a few examples of our commercial customers. Included are Schwann's, Bimbo, Nestle, Alpha Baking, and many other commercial customers across the US. But what's striking to me as I work again with our product development team, sales marketing teams on gaseous fuel technology, electric, hydrogen, autonomous, is propane still remains the most versatile solution that we have. And I'm going to keep hitting on this. We have not met an application to duty cycle climate that we can't develop a version for. So the next slide are the paratransit customers that we have out there. We have over 1,500 of those on the road. And the following slide is all of our school bus customers across the US. Probably if you've heard press, it's on the bus side of the business. And then the next slide just talks about what we're doing, as I mentioned, to reduce the carbon intensity of the fuel going into the vehicles. I'm not going to get deep into the chemistry. Tucker already did that, but the bottom line is decarbonized or renewable versions of propane and DME blends are a result of lots of different processes, but all of them can be used in the same vehicles that I just featured. So you can buy an ultra low emissions propane vehicle today, virtually no NOx or particulate matter tailpipe emissions, much lower greenhouse gas emissions. And you can use the fuels that Tucker talked about when they are available in your state later on down the road. And today the carbon intensities are down to -275. The next slide quickly is where renewable propane and renewable DME production facilities are today. The top photos are REG, and the bottom one is Oberon. They have other announcements globally that have been driven by SHV Energy. And I think that we'll see a lot more production and supply as we move forward worldwide, which is very exciting. And then the last slide, just to wrap up, is that there is existing, as Tucker talked about, renewable propane is being used today. Virginia announced a partnership with Blossoming Gas, and it's being pumped in vehicles today. And you'll see others. There's a lot of it used in forklifts and off-road applications in Oregon and California because of the low carbon fuel standard. Oberon's also looking at building more facilities. But aside from that part of the investment happening, there's a lot of investment, including from DOE, in R&D and commercialization in the areas of engine technology and reformation. So I think that the message here is that there's still a lot of really exciting research, development, deployment, commercialization happening in gaseous fuel technology and even hydrogen, as I mentioned. And we're excited to continue driving down the carbon intensity and offering more and more versatile solutions to our customers.
It's great, Chelsea. Thank you. I think it's striking to note that the federal government is continuing to fund and provide grant money and whatnot to renewable and low carbon gaseous fuels, but we haven't been able to get the state of New Jersey to do that. So that's something that we as a group need to continue to work on. So I just want to thank again all the speakers and all the participants. You know, we have thrown a lot at you. It was a very full program, and that's the problem in putting an agenda like this together. There's just so much to talk about, and so many interesting projects going on, and new technologies and new developments. So right now, I want to turn it to Joanna Underwood, who is, as mentioned, the founder of Energy Vision. And she's going to wrap it up and take this home for us. Joanna.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. This has been an absolutely fascinating session. And I'm thinking only briefly back to 1989 when the organization I ran first started looking at natural gas vehicles, and there was hardly anything else going on. And in this 30 years, we've seen, I think, already an absolute transportation and energy revolution that just goes to show that when human beings put their minds to it, they can develop ways to live that are sustainable. And that's my continuing basis for hope that this can be done. All of these projects that have been talked about and technologies will be absolutely critical to our future. But I'd like to come back to one thing at the end here, and that is what we heard in Glasgow at the conference is the absolute immediacy and urgent need to cut methane emissions in half within the next decade. And of all the things that we're working on, to me, the most vital to absolutely pursue at the greatest speed is the 30% of the fossil fuel, oil and gas leak emissions of methane that need to be stopped, and also the whole process of anaerobic digestion to put organics in tanks and turn them into fuel and turn them into compost and soil amendments. 50% of the methane in this country is coming not from fossil fuels, but from organic waste. And so I think while all of these things need to be pursued with great speed, I am most urgently concerned about our doing the things that will address our methane issue. And the work here that was particularly vital to me is the talk about the oil and gas leaks and about renewable natural gas. Those are the two ways that we can actually tackle methane. And if we don't tackle that, as has been said, in the next decade, we may have runaway climate change that won't give us another 50 years to make the change that will be needed for a sustainable world. So I would like to just thank everyone who is working on these issues, working on these projects, but to throw out a special urgent view that everything that we can do to stop methane now is where the most urgent priority is. So thank you very much. I have been thrilled listening to all these presentations. And thank you, Chuck, for the work you're doing at New Jersey Clean Cities. It's quite fabulous.
Well, thank you, Joanna, and thank you for the lifetime dedication that you've put into all of these issues. As I started out with, you've been a role model, and it's great to work with you. And thank you to the entire Energy Vision team, Matt and Phil, for working with us on this, and to my team, and to all the speakers, and to all the participants. And I think we're about 5 minutes over, but considering the number of speakers and the great things that everybody had to say, I'd say that's pretty good. So Matt, I see you just popped on. Any closing remarks?
Nope, I'll just echo your comments and Joanna's. This has been really thrilling. We're eager to stay engaged, stay involved in New Jersey and elsewhere. And anywhere where people are really recognizing the dire, urgent need to pursue these solutions and to scale them up, because it's really at the end of the day about implementation, and implementation starts at home. So we're optimistic, and we'll continue to push forward, and eager to stay in touch with you and work on New Jersey and New York and everywhere else.
Sounds good. All right, thanks everybody. That's it. Thanks for participating.
Thank you.